There have been two things I've never been able to figure out: the infatuation with Stevie Ray Vaughan amongst guitar players, and how to properly clean my Vitamix. But I've spent the entire month deep diving SRV. Thank you so much to the people who watched the initial video about this. I've done a bunch of videos over on the channel about different songs, different playing techniques, stuff like that. And I think I'm ready to give a somewhat informed opinion on Stevie Ray Vaughan. So we're going to go through what the negatives against him are in the world. We're going to go through the studio albums, the live albums, a little bit about the guitar playing tone and the gear. We're going to have a performance with the incredible Laura Clapp, who's got an album coming out soon, so make sure you stay tuned for that because I think that turned out really good. And then just kind of some final thoughts and stuff, right? So first, let's talk about the case against Stevie Ray Vaughan. I didn't say that. This is what other people say. The patron saint of blues lawyers stole all his guitar playing from Jimi Hendrix and Albert King. Only had one speed, full-on pentatonic madness, hitting it at 11 out of 10. Let's debunk these as we go through the studio albums. So let's start off with the very first album, Texas Flood. I was very misinformed about the sound of Stevie Ray Vaughan, and we're going to get to this when we get to In Step. But Texas Flood is such a raw, live sounding album that I instantly got it when I heard Texas Flood. Obviously Pride and Joy's on there, which in some ways, some people might consider that his biggest. I consider Pride and Joy to kind of be the quintessential Stevie Ray Vaughan song after listening to everything. Pride and Joy is on there, which is kind of like, you know, it stands out for sure. But the whole album is like such a vibe. It definitely made a lot more sense when I heard Texas Flood as an album beginning to end. I think Testify is probably my favorite track on there, and then also Lenny. Those would probably be the two standout tracks to me. I think Pride and Joy I've just like heard so many times, it almost didn't like really clock. But in the context of everything just being a raw trio blues band, makes a lot of sense. So I thought that was awesome. And then to follow that up with Couldn't Stand the Weather, I think is a pretty iconic 1-2. In fact, I feel like you probably could have just like stopped after that and almost had like the same reverence in the guitar community specifically. But man, Couldn't Stand the Weather is like fantastic. I mean, it starts out with Scuttlebutting, which is just like Guitar Olympics to me. It's funny, especially seeing him live do that. It's like, oh my God, that's insane. That's when I was like, all right. At first I was like, you know, maybe I'll put 13s on my Strat here, keep it tuned down to half step. And really, no, dude, I'm not even gonna try. Like, Scuttlebutting is so next level blues guitar playing that it's just like, just give up. Just give up. You're never gonna be able to do that. I think one of a kind for sure. My favorite track on here is probably Couldn't Stand the Weather. I think that is just such a great groove and really highlights the strength of the band, Double Trouble, which again, super underrated, incredible trio. Again, these first two albums I think are by far my favorite, just because it is harnessing the power of an awesome rock trio. I feel like Couldn't Stand the Weather is maybe the next step up. I want to say the arrangements are probably like a little bit better on Couldn't Stand the Weather, even if I think it also has the best songs. Now that I'm kind of thinking about it, Texas Flood is just kind of like a beginning to end vibe. But Couldn't Stand the Weather, I think, is his best album, just because there's a big variance, and it really kind of puts to bed any of the things we were talking about, because it is very original sounding. Obviously, there's like the Hendrix covers and stuff like that on there, but like it definitely sounds like he has a very unique voice, just an extension of the first album, which is fantastic. But just like Lenny did in the first album, there's like a couple songs that really show the softer side of Stevie Ray Vaughan, that he's not just like ripping pentatonic solos all over the place. Just a great, well-rounded guitar player and a great, well-rounded band too. Again, people always sleep on the band. It's never just one guy for the most part. The band is fantastic. They do exactly the right thing pretty much all the time. Next up is Soul to Soul. I think everybody can pretty much agree that this one doesn't really have the hits on it like maybe some of the other albums do. You can definitely tell they're branching out. You're starting to kind of get more instruments involved, which again, I really think like the heart and soul of Stevie Ray Vaughan is the power trio aspect of it. So I didn't love Soul to Soul nearly as much as the first two albums, but I will say, like, vocally he's so good. I think people sleep on his vocals too. Like, Stevie Ray Vaughan is an incredible singer, and we'll talk more about that with the live stuff, but I think Change It is probably like the strongest song for me on this. It's probably my favorite one to listen to. But also Life Without You. You can see John Mayer being born in Life Without You. It's just kind of like everything that John Mayer ended up becoming, which I think is like a pretty important track. So really you kind of see this as maybe the threshold of crossing over from his influences, like I said, Hendrix, Albert King, into maybe more of what we see in the next album, which is In Step. So I think, I don't want to get too much into like the personal life component of it with Stevie Ray Vaughan. There's been a lot written about his sobriety and how he was worried about that affecting the music, so on and so forth, but In Step is what I now know I thought SRV was, just because I think this is his most commercially successful album. This has like Crossfire and Tightrope and like the bangers on there. But I really don't like the production of this album. It is just like peak 80s. There's something about it that the best way that I can explain it is if you've ever seen those band-in-a-box pedals where maybe like, you know, you plug it into a pedal and you play like a chord progression and then it follows along with what it thinks the bass and drums and keyboards should play. It sounds exactly like a band-in-the-box thing. I really feel like Double Trouble specifically is completely neutered on this album in lieu of trying to make some hits and stuff. I think Crossfire is a perfect example of that. A really well-crafted song. Stevie sounds great. Guitar playing is next level. But it has like the dopiest bass line. Boom, 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 boom. This is everything that I think of from a production standpoint when I think of like your typical blues bar band and the sound that I don't like. So In Step is a really funny place because the songs are probably his best songs in a lot of ways, but for me, the 80s production, even though it was like the tail end of the 80s, just kind of, I don't know, kind of makes it sound generic. But an interesting point that a friend of mine had, this was actually kind of like the first time that sound existed. So I think a lot of this is me retroactively disliking this because this was the first example of a sound that became super copied over time. And like some stuff that I just don't personally like is like a listener when I go out and I hear, you know, I don't know, some, like I said, some just kind of like blues bar band trying to sound like In Step. But at the time, it was probably like really incredible. Either way, I think Tightrope is probably my favorite track on this just because it has like such a cool chord progression and such a cool guitar outlining the chords and stuff like that. Not my favorite album for sure. Too much going on. I don't love the sound of the keys with the band. I just want the trio. Just bring me the trio. Come on. And then we'll also talk about Family Style. Now what's interesting is, so Family Style was released after his death. It's him and his brother Jimmy, who I always want to call Jimmy Ray Vaughan, which is so stupid, but I don't know. I'll never not want to call Jimmy Vaughan Jimmy Ray Vaughan for whatever stupid reason. The songs on here I don't love, but what's funny is like I feel like this is actually like the best sounding album instrumental wise. I almost think these songs work better as just guitar instrumentals. I almost think the vocals kind of take me out of it a little bit because they're just a little, I don't know, they're kind of cringy bluesy songs sometimes. I think Telephone Song is probably the strongest track on here for me, but there's no denying that the Vaughan brothers sound amazing. Specifically, just great guitar album, but the lyrics and the vocals and the background vocals and stuff kind of take me out of it. It's almost like they're trying to like, I don't know, ride this line between like pop and blues and rock at the same time, almost like a little gospel-y sometimes, and I don't think it totally works, but also, you know, it's released after his death, so what can you do? So this brings us to the live recordings. I think that I was listening to them kind of in concert. I was going parallel back and forth between the live stuff and the recorded stuff. The live stuff is where everything totally starts to make sense. Once you see them as a trio live, just slaying it pretty much in every performance, I'm like, okay, I totally get it. I almost feel like I was lied to by In Step and like the radio hit SRV era that I really didn't understand what I was in for. Now, even within the live stuff on YouTube and on Spotify and everything, there's a huge dynamic range of what you're gonna get. I think a lot of the main two in the comments on the first video was the El Macombo stuff and the Austin City Limits one in 1989. And these are a really good kind of dynamic to like put against each other. And El Macombo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You can just tell it's like absolute 11 out of 10 energy. He's just ripping the entire time. The band is so solid. Everything is just like, what an incredible night that would have been to like actually be at. versus the later Austin City Limits one, I feel like he was definitely like a little bit more reserved, but I think vocally he may have sounded his best actually in 1989. It didn't seem to me like he was as into it in 89 as he was in 83, with the grand exception of when he plays Voodoo Child in 89, which I feel like 89 Voodoo Child SRV is the best he's ever played guitar. It's insane how once he just kind of like gets into Voodoo Child and gets off of his own stuff, he almost kind of transforms. Like he goes to another place, his body language changes, everything changes, and it's just like an incredibly impressive performance. So check out Voodoo Child because it's insane. I do somewhat take issue with a lot of the comments in the first one. I take issue. I just disagree with like this stuff being better than the Hendrix stuff. Well, it's very interesting to me. And a lot of the people's criticisms of this was like, yeah, he just kind of like ripped everything off from Albert King and Jimi Hendrix. This actually had me take a lot of detours into seeing live Jimi Hendrix stuff and live Albert King stuff, which I was just absolutely mesmerized by. So I do think that there is something to Hendrix and Albert coming along first and kind of just like being so next level in how they changed the game. And I think of SRV as more honoring that than improving on it, if that makes any sense. Like, I definitely wouldn't say his stuff is better, even though the Voodoo Child, like I said, at ACL is mind-blowing. But I think Hendrix is just like, to me, Hendrix is just like a totally different animal. Another thing I do want to say, though, speaking of Albert King, he actually has kind of a co-starring album with Albert King that was released in like 1999 or something like that, even though it was like decades before. It's fantastic. Everybody should listen to that. I think some of my favorite stuff of his is actually on that Sessions album with Albert King, him and SRV, and even just like the YouTube videos from that are really so compelling to watch. Kind of like the young SRV is like, I guess like a prodigy maybe. The old bluesman Albert King. I think that probably is the most engaging stuff that I've actually seen since I started this journey. But just really, really phenomenal stuff all the way around. But you could almost take a scene from any live thing with Stevie and Double Trouble. I just think it's so good, and it just works so well as a trio, and it's so refreshing to hear. It doesn't sound like that kind of basic blues stuff that I was maybe misinformed that I thought he was maybe more into, just because of some of the songs on Instep. All right, I do want to talk a little bit about the tone. So he famously played super thick strings, tuned down, tube screamer, Fender Deluxe amp. I definitely have been following the Fender Deluxe amp thing. I think we got a really good version of it when Samurai Guitarist was here helping me with this. But tube screamers to me have always been a little bit of a one-trick pony. I am so stoked on this pedal pawn Texan Twang pedal that they sent over. I did another video on this. I don't want to talk too much about the technique and playing stuff because Samurai Guitarist did such a better job explaining that because he's like essentially a disciple of SRV. We'll talk to him about this later. But we did a couple videos too, which I will link you to in the description, using the pedal pawn Texan Twang. That is an awesome pedal because it's got like 3 different kind of modes. So you can really get approximations of his tone throughout the different eras, which to me there is a pretty glaring difference in his tones between like the eras of like the live, the early stuff, and then the more produced stuff. So shout out to Pedal Pawn. I'll have a link in the description for that pedal if you guys are interested at all. But yeah, also just been running that deluxe reverb. Didn't really have to overdrive it that much just because the Twang does a good job of that, but this guitar is pretty sick. This is the Fender SRV, which, you know, obviously they did it right. I am such a convert to the whammy bar being on top here. I've never actually seen that before with, like, do any other players use it like that? But it kind of seems like, to me, it's just, it's out of my way when I want it out of the way, but it's like super easy to kind of either bring it up over the top or not. Like, he was onto something with the whammy bar being reversed, so big fan of that. Other than that, we were just recording it with I had some Neumann mics on the cab, and then I put a little bit of the Arturia chorus on it in post, and I think we got a pretty good approximation of the sound of it. So without further ado, let's actually check out the performance with me, samurai guitarist, Laura Clapp on the vocals. Again, incredible. Please go follow Laura. I'll have a link in the description because she's got an album coming out soon. And my boy Jack on drums. So check that out, and then we'll come back for some final thoughts.
Yeah. Caught up in the whirlwind, can't catch my breath. Knee deep in hot water, broke out in a cold sweat. Can't catch a turtle in this rat race. Feels like I'm losing time at a breakneck pace. I was walking the tightrope, stepping on my friends. Walking the tightrope, it was a shame and a sin. Walking the tightrope between wrong and right. Walking the tightrope both day and night. Tightrope every day and every night. Walking the tightrope, bring it all around. Walking the tightrope from the lost to the found. Walking the tightrope stretched around the world. Walking the tightrope to save the boys and girls. Walking the tightrope, let's make it right. Walking the tightrope, do it tonight. Walking the tightrope. You got me walking the tightrope, yeah, yeah,
Fact, if you turn the lights off in your bathroom and in the mirror look into it and say Texas flood 3 times, Samurai Guitarist will appear in your house.
Here I am.
So you have been my guide for most of the Stevie Ray Vaughan exploration.
Tried my best.
Why? What is it about him that first kind of like got you into it?
There's a lot to my love of old SRV. I think one of my biggest things with him is that he is kind of one of the last bluesmen that I know of, at least mainstream bluesmen, to truly encapsulate that raw emotion of the blues. Like you hear in a lot of early blues recordings, Sunhouse, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, there's just this pure expression of a suffering human condition. And it's not about how well you play all the time, it's about that whole thing. You gotta play with feel. Right? Mm-hmm. And Stevie to me was like that guy who played with feel, turned up to 11, turned up to 12. It's all the way up. It's as high as it can go. And every single note he plays, it's like he's playing with this absolute maxed out intensity. And one of the things I find so interesting about Stevie is you can figure out a lot of things about him. You can figure out what chords he played. You can figure out Stevie Ray Vaughan riffs. But the one thing that pretty much no other human can do is play with the same intensity that he played with. Most people can play with it for like 5 seconds when they're just playing as hard as they can, putting everything into every note, but you burn out. Stevie would do that for an entire night. That's the only way he played, was this maxed out energy. And I think that's one of the things that's so unique about him. It's one of the things that nobody else can really do. I really quite enjoy many elements of his playing. I find he stands out from a lot of other blues players. He does this thing in his playing where he really highlights chords in a unique way. He'll lead his musical lines from one line to the next. So like a lot of blues players are very play a lick, break, play a lick, break, play a lick. And he definitely has a lot of that in his playing. So you might hear someone play like, and that's kind of a break. That's how a lot of blues players traditionally approach the blues, but then Stevie like ties things in together. He'll build these lines. It's like all these things flowing together. So like it's kind of like almost a jazzy approach that he implements, and I think he got that because he listened to guys like Kenny Burrell, Wes Montgomery, and in jazz a big thing is phrasing from one line to the next, playing over top of the bar line instead of just thinking of these bars as these rigid musical structures that you have to place your ideas in. He would like mend them and blend the bars together. Like you can see how those lines, like they set up that next idea. So if his ideas, he builds into that. And he does stuff like that in his playing that I just find so interesting. You can learn his licks, but trying to actually phrase like Stevie Ray Vaughan and trying to think over top of the bar line like he does is extremely, extremely hard.
Favorite Stevie Ray Vaughan song?
That's tough. It's something off Texas Flood. Texas Flood to me is by far his best recording. I think Rude Mood is an incredible instrumental display. It's just like full force. He's playing fast. All the licks are cool. Every 12 bars is something new. But I think like the quintessential iconic song is it's Pride and Joy. Everything about that song, from the shuffle to the guitar solo, to just like the drums twisting, everything about that is perfect. That's the one. Like when I think Stevie Ray, I think Pride and Joy.
So what's really interesting to me doing this, and again, this is like the third time I've done this with the band. So the first time I tried this was the music of the Grateful Dead, which I knew people loved, but I never really resonated with. I spent a month with the music, and then I kind of understood, especially through the live stuff, which kind of makes sense for the Grateful Dead. I did it again with Steely Dan, and I learned a lot from that, and then now I'm doing it with SRV. And one thing that I have come to understand more than anything else, especially reading the comments and reading how divisive a lot of the comments were, and how just people were like, if you don't understand Stevie Ray Vaughan, you'll never understand because you have no soul and you suck at guitar. It's like, okay, sure, okay, guys. And then another thing, I remember a comment from the Steely Dan video. I made a comment where I was like comparing them a little bit to Radiohead as far as like taking stuff and kind of like pushing it to the next level. And I remember one comment said, it was like, I can't believe you would compare Steely Dan to like Radiohead. As if it was unfathomable that someone would put Radiohead in the same class as Steely Dan. Which to me, Radiohead is like clearly a superior band than Steely Dan. Like to me it's like not even a question. But then I thought like, you know, maybe this is just a cultural thing, and I think that's my previous issue with Stevie Ray Vaughan. A lot of times when you're getting into music that came out before your time, before you were even born, it's pretty interesting how you think of it in relation to everything else that came out before you were born. And the interesting thing about like this time in music history, anything kind of post-classical, post-Beatles, really essentially, it hasn't been that long. It's like less than 100 years of music, like only a couple generations of music that has the entirety of what we consider kind of modern music. So with Stevie Ray Vaughan specifically, I never saw him in my mind as an 80s artist, which clearly he obviously was. I almost had him kind of like a contemporary of the old bluesmen like Albert King, or like a contemporary of Jimi Hendrix's, not thinking that it's like kind of like a generation, or at least a half generation removed. So thinking about it in that way, it really kind of opens your eyes to, okay, I don't like the production of In Step. It sounds kind of like a generic blues band album, but it's like, well, this is the first time this has ever been done. And thinking of it through the prism of like, this was really a blues artist that came along and made waves first off like a David Bowie album. Like even hearing that, the Let's Dance stuff, having Bowie and Stevie Ray Vaughan existing in a similar timeline, like doesn't make sense in my millennial brain, because Stevie Ray Vaughan just seems like he's so far removed from the music of like modern 80s stuff. So thinking about the emergence of a virtuoso blues artist having massive cultural success, pop cultural success, in a time where the other music of the 80s is, say what you want about it, you know, definitely way removed from like the power rawness of like a Zeppelin or, you know, the Hendrix Trio or anything like that. Everything does make a lot more sense when you think about it that way. It's like, okay, well, at the time, if you were around to see him kind of like jump on the scene and just like crush it with Texas Flood, you would have a totally different opinion of it, kind of going back and seeing it. And that's why I feel very lucky to be living in the YouTube era and being kind of like part of it, having a YouTube channel and really experiencing so much music through YouTube of the past. Just having access to like the Austin City Limits stuff that he did, the Albert King stuff that he kind of co-starred in. That's, I feel, where I learn way, way more than listening to the studio albums on Spotify, where it's just, okay, blues rock music, and the same thing as like, you know, maybe Zeppelin is blues rock music, you know, and then that makes so much more sense seeing it live. So I'm so grateful that we have the live stuff, because every time I've done this, the live stuff is where you really get a sense culturally where they were, because, you know, it looks a certain way, you can see the audience reacting to it in a certain way, and it's just super cool. So I really think that, again, it's not like I've never heard Stevie Ray Vaughan before, but 100% without a doubt, I would always think of In Step Stevie Ray Vaughan, and not Couldn't Stand the Weather, Texas Flood Stevie Ray Vaughan, which to me are almost kind of like completely different artists. And again, no shade to him, like he sounded amazing on the In-Step stuff and like even Family Style and everything else, but it really is the live stuff to me that kind of makes it shine. So I don't know, I have an experience. Let me know what I got wrong, let me know what I got right, let me know what I should do next. And this is really, it's a very enlightening, educational thing for me to kind of go back and do this. Also, very, very interested in who's watching this. Are people who actually already know Stevie Ray Vaughan and just want to think what some guy thinks about SRV? Or are you kind of like in the same boat as I am, discovering it for the first time? Because I'll link you to everything that I watched as far as like the live stuff, because again, definitely worth your time. And also, maybe you'll find yourself on a rabbit hole with like the Hendrix stuff and the Albert King stuff too, because I'm a big Jimmy guy myself. Albert King I knew nothing about, really, other than just like the name and like a couple of like songs and stuff. But infatuated with how awesome Albert King is too. So thanks for watching. Thanks to Fender for sending the Strat over. Thanks to Pedal Pawn for sending the pedal over. Thanks to Samurai Guitarist for helping out. And Laura and Jack. Go show them all some love. Thank you for watching. And like I said, if you have any comments you want to flame me on or any suggestions of what I should do next, please let me know in the comments. I'll talk to y'all soon.